The quiet town of Fairbrook rarely witnessed anything that could be called extraordinary. Life there moved slowly, wrapped in traditions and silent expectations. People lived, worked, and grew old in the same rhythm, rarely challenging what was considered normal. But when 19-year-old Clara Reynolds announced her engagement to Harold Whitmore, a 75-year-old retired judge, the whole town froze in disbelief. Clara was known for her innocence and shy nature. She was a girl who blushed when spoken to, whose laughter was soft like the ringing of wind chimes. Raised by her grandmother after her parents' death, she had grown up shielded from the harshness of the world. To many, she was like a delicate porcelain doll. Beautiful, fragile, and untouchable, rumors always followed her, yet none could truly say they knew what was in her heart. Harold, on the other hand, was a man who had lived through decades of triumphs and losses. Once a respected figure in law, he carried the weight of time in his stooped shoulders and silver hair. Widowed for almost 20 years, he spent his days tending his garden, reading thick books no one else cared for, and walking with the slow certainty of a man who had long accepted life's impermanence. The day their engagement became public, the town exploded. Some whispered in cafes, others shouted openly in disapproval, mothers clutched their daughters closer, men scoffed in disbelief, and the church bells seemed to toll heavier with judgment. How could she, and he's old enough to be her grandfather, since she doesn't know what she's doing, and he's using her innocence to fill his loneliness? Clara heard it all but said nothing. She held Harold's hand tightly when they walked together, her small, delicate fingers dwarfed by his wrinkled, trembling ones. Every look thrown at them was a storm, but she chose to face it quietly. Inside, however, she was not as naive as people believed. She knew what she was doing, though not entirely why. The truth was, Harold had saved her once, years ago when she was 16. Clara had wandered into the old library where Harold spent much of his time. She had been crying quietly, overwhelmed by the bullying of her peers who mocked her for being too quiet, too different. Harold had noticed her, offered her a seat, and spoke to her with a gentleness that felt rare in the world. He didn't treat her like a child, but as a person whose pain was valid. Over time, they became unlikely friends. He told her stories of his youth, of the mistakes he made and the love he once had. She, in turn, read poetry aloud to him, her voice becoming a soothing balm in his lonely evenings. The bond deepened not through passion at first, but through an unspoken need, her need for stability, his need for companionship. By 19, Clara began to see Harold not as an old man, but as the only person who truly understood her. When he confessed his feelings, hesitant, ashamed, and almost apologetic, she shocked him by confessing her own. Vows. Clara's voice was steady, but her heart raced like a bird in flight. Harold's vows were broken with tears. He had thought love was over for him long ago, yet here stood a young woman promising to walk beside him until the end. When the priest declared them husband and wife, Clara kissed Harold gently, not with the fire of youth, but with the depth of someone who had chosen love against all odds. And yet, even in that moment of bliss, a shadow lingered in her heart. Because Clara was a virgin, untouched and inexperienced, and the thought of their wedding night both frightened and confused her. The world had told her that intimacy with someone so much older was unnatural, even disturbing. She wondered if she was strong enough to silence those voices when the time came. That night, Harold sat beside her in their small bedroom, lit only by the glow of a lamp. He looked at her, his wrinkled face filled with tenderness but also hesitation. "You don't have to," he whispered, sensing her tension. "Not tonight, not ever if it feels wrong. Love isn't just about that. It's about being here, with you." Clara's heart softened, tears filled her eyes as she leaned against him. "I don't want to, but I'm afraid, not of you, of myself, afraid of being judged, afraid I won't know how." Harold wrapped his arms around her, holding her like something fragile yet infinitely precious. "Then let's just stay like this. Let the world say what it wants. We'll live at our pace, in our way." In that embrace, Clara felt safe. Safe enough to believe that their love, no matter how misunderstood, was real. But she also knew their story was far from over. The whispers outside their walls were only growing louder, and sooner or later, love would be tested not only by society's judgment, but by the cruel passage of time itself. The days after the wedding settled into a strange, almost dreamlike rhythm. Clara and Harold lived quietly in his old cottage on the outskirts of Fairbrook, surrounded by tall oaks and the constant hum of cicadas. To them, the world inside those walls was gentle, peaceful, and theirs alone. But outside, the world refused to stay silent. People stared when they went to the grocery store together. Neighbors gossiped openly. Whispers followed Clara's every step like shadows she couldn't escape. She's ruining her life. Wait until he dies. She'll regret everything. It's disgusting, unnatural. Clara tried to ignore it. She smiled at Harold during their morning tea, laughed softly when he forgot where he'd left his glasses, and read poetry aloud to him every evening. But at night, lying awake, she wondered how long they could live like this. Two souls bound in love, yet chained by the judgment of everyone around them. One Sunday afternoon, Clara walked into the town square alone. She wanted to prove to herself she could face the world without hiding behind Harold's presence. But as soon as she stepped into the bakery, silence fell. Conversation stopped. Mrs. Green, an older woman who had known Clara's grandmother for years, looked her straight in the eye and said coldly, "Oh, you think you're in love, child, but you've been fooled. He's stolen your youth. When he's gone, what will you have left?" Nothing. Clara's chest tightened. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. She wanted to shout that it wasn't like that Harold hadn't stolen anything. If anything, he had given her a reason to live. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she walked out, her eyes brimming with tears. When she returned home, Harold was waiting by the porch. He saw her face and immediately understood. "And they said something again, didn't they?" She nodded, fighting back sobs. "Why can't they just let us be happy?" Harold pulled her into his arms, his frail body trembling as he held her. "Because happiness scares people, especially when it doesn't look the way they expect it to." But as the months passed, Clara began to wrestle with something far more difficult than gossip, her own youth. She loved Harold deeply, but at 19, she couldn't ignore the tugging inside her chest when she saw other young couples holding hands in the park, laughing with a freedom she didn't always feel. Sometimes when she looked at Harold's tired eyes, she wondered, did I give up too much? Am I allowed to want more? One evening, she sat on the porch while Harold dozed in his chair beside her. The sun painted the horizon in shades of orange and pink, and Clara's heart ached. She imagined herself running down the street with someone her age, dancing at a party, dreaming of children, planning a long future. Things Harold could never give her. The thought filled her with guilt. She turned and looked at him, his hands resting peacefully on his lap, his breathing slow but steady. He looked so fragile, so human, and in that fragility, she remembered why she had chosen him, because his love was real, steady, and like anything else she had ever known. Still, the conflict tore at her heart. The real test came one winter when Harold fell ill. It started with a cough, deep, rattling, persistent. Clara insisted he see a doctor, but Harold resisted until his body grew too weak to ignore it. The diagnosis came like a thunderclap, pneumonia, complicated by his age and a weak heart. The hospital became their second home. Clara sat by his bed day and night, holding his hand, reading to him, spoon-feeding him when he was too weak. The nurses whispered about their strange marriage, but Clara ignored them. Her world had shrunk to the sound of his breathing, the rise and fall of his chest, the fear that every night could be his last. One night, Harold looked at her with tears in his tired eyes. "Clara, I don't want you to waste your life on me. You're 19. You deserve to love someone who can run with you, dance with you, give you the world. All I can give you is this bed, this fragile old body, and a heart that won't last much longer." Clara pressed her forehead against his. "You've already given me the world, Harold. Love isn't measured in years. It's measured in moments. And I don't care if I only get a few more with you. They'll be enough." Her words broke him. He wept, not from weakness, but from the overwhelming gratitude of being loved in a way he never thought possible. Harold eventually recovered enough to return home, though his body was weaker than before. Clara adjusted her life entirely around his needs. She cooked his meals, managed his medicine, and became his constant companion. Her friends, what few she had left, drifted even further away. One day, her grandmother came to visit. She stood in the doorway, her face lined with both anger and sorrow. "Clara," she said firmly, "this is not the life I wanted for you. You're still a child. You've become his nurse instead of his wife. Is this what you call love? Clara's eyes burned. Yes, Grandma, this is love, staying when it's hard, choosing someone even when the world says you shouldn't. If you can't see that, then maybe you've forgotten what love really means. Her grandmother's face softened, pain flickering in her eyes. She reached out, touched Clara's cheek, and whispered, "Or maybe I just don't want to watch you suffer when he leaves you behind." The years passed slowly, each one carving deeper lines into Harold's face and deeper strength into Clara's spirit. She remained by his side through every struggle, every setback. Their love was no longer questioned inside their home. It was lived, day by day, in small gestures. The way she tucked a blanket around him, the way he smiled when she entered a room, the way silence between them felt full rather than empty. But outside, the whispers never stopped. By now, Clara no longer cared. She had grown used to being the subject of ridicule. What mattered was the quiet truth only she and Harold shared. One summer evening, Harold sat with her in the garden. His voice was weak, but steady. Clara, when I'm gone, promise me something." She shook her head fiercely. "Don't talk like that." "Promise me," he insisted. "Promise me you'll live after me, that you'll love again, laugh again."